Well, you're okay.
From Erie's own Government Access, Channel 9, from the City Hall Council Chambers, it's time once again for the Taxpayers Hotline Show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, your host.
There they go. They got to put the wide angle on, Mark. This is Councilman Kaz Kwiatkowski with my friend Mark Alexandrovich, ex-city councilman. And Mark, I want to thank you for bringing our special guest. Would you like to introduce him?
Yes.
Although I think he's familiar. But
Well, we have today Mr. Jay Badams from the Erie School District, and the thought process went along the lines that for a substantial part of the city, of government, of entities, that the school district is, there really is no venue per se other than the newspaper, or television, for you to really tell everyone what's going on, what's happening at the school district. Right. So we decided to ask you to join us and to spend some time telling all of the viewers what's happening.
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity.
And I think in fairness, Mark, we'll put a special, we'll turn the phones off for a little bit. So if all you out in the listening audience will just hold on, we'll calls later. Sure. We'll open up the lines a little later, but in fairness to Superintendent Badams, since he took the time out to come here, we're going to give him some time to talk a little bit, and then we'll open it up to your questions.
Sure. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with folks about where we are in terms of the district's finances, at least, since that's what has the most impact, obviously, on our tax situation. The first thing I wanted to say is that there's a lot of information floating around out there about what the board will and won't do about taxes this year. And just to make sure everyone's aware, the board passed a preliminary budget that had in it the possibility of a tax increase. So what it did was essentially keep open that option. And but the board has given me very, very clear direction that they would like to avoid raising any additional taxes this coming year. So we're doing everything we can administratively to craft that budget and come up with a way to, one more time, cut our way to a balanced budget so that we can avoid imposing any more burden on our local taxpayers. And that's one thing that we're keenly aware of in the district. We know, and this is a phenomenon around the state, especially in urban areas like ours, that too much of the burden for funding the taxes has been falling upon our residents. So that's what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, I know we got pretty much the same problem with this city, and I know the homeowners wish that Harrisburg would change to other forms of taxation. Mm-hmm. Another thing that would help, and I don't think anything's changed since I left the board, is the mandates that follow the district.
Right.
And it's like, how do they expect local, when they mandate it, people don't understand that. Mandate doesn't mean they fund it. I was surprised. I think when I was on the board, they told me that full funding would be considered, at its absolute 50%.
Right.
But in reality, we were getting 35.
Right. Yeah, we're nowhere near 50%. And so, just to put it in perspective for people, I can't say that. I started this job in 2010, and it's become pretty tiresome. I'm sure it's just that way for our taxpayers too. Every year hearing how the district is struggling to make ends meet and that we're always trying to fill a budget void. But we have historically had costs that rise that create that gap between the revenue we make from taxes and the dollars that we spend to educate the students and pay for our facilities and everything else. And everyone's aware at home that the price of goods and services goes up every year, and that's anywhere from 2 to 3% usually. So if we didn't do anything, if we didn't raise taxes at all, we would be guaranteed to pay more for all the things that we use, everything from fuel to the supplies that we use in classrooms and so forth. And so there has to be some corresponding cut to the budget. And you throw in the fact that up until fairly recently, every year there was a raise. That we had a teacher's contract that guaranteed a 4% annual salary increase that only recently ended in 2014. Right now we have no contract. So there was no raise for teachers this year, and that's a very significant amount of money. It's about $2 million a year, or that's what it was historically. And And so that's an obligation the district has, and you know, that the taxpayer then shoulders. So we don't have any such raise in the budget right now, and we're in negotiation, but still, we're facing a $7 million shortfall in this budget. And what's that from? That's these unfunded mandates you're talking about. And the two biggest ones that are impacting us now are charter schools, and I'll go into exactly how that works in a sec, but the pension cost. So right now, all teachers, all education employees are part of the PSERS retirement system, and that system was doing just fine several years ago when the stock market was soaring and getting double-digit returns. But ever since the recession, the pension fund has been depleted. More and more people have retired out, taken their contributions out, and now we're in a situation where at the state level, the number is anywhere from $40 to $50 billion that our pension fund is underfunded. And so what the state has decided to do is pass that cost onto the local districts by increasing our obligation in terms of the district's employer contribution to the fund. So the biggest single annual increase we're facing is that obligation we have for funding the pension system. So we're going to be over 25% of our total payroll. So if you can imagine that, we have about a $65 million payroll. 25% of that number has to be sent to Harrisburg to fund PSERS.
Now, the state, didn't they, for a couple of years, didn't fund it too, right?
That's correct, and that's why, another reason why that gap is so big. So
Yeah, we had the same, Mark, you don't remember, but if you go back to our legacy here, our funds are, at the city, are presently about 70% totally funded.
well, that's great.
And actually, there's three separate ones, so you have to look at each one. But the common denominator was way back when MMOs weren't pushed. The city did not put money into it. It was down to a low of 35. And I think there's a reality. As I talk to employees, I think a lot of them are not against, putting more money into their fund. Mm-hmm. That may have to happen. We may have to, completely evaluate pensions. And, because that's like, it is a big cost. Right. And if we on the local level have to fund them, and so is the personnel, it's going to have to be a two-way street.
Sure. Now, what's happened? This particular pension system is across the state, so it's
Right.
not like city government where we can actually negotiate it or
Right.
have a process for doing that on a local level. This is dictated by the state, and our obligation is now 25%. We get a 50% rebate on that contribution. So our net annual cost for our pension is over $10 million after we're reimbursed.
Boy, that's almost parallels the city.
Yeah.
See,
So
there you go.
So there's an unfunded mandate. That's going to go up. The state has the plan for next year is that we're going to owe over 30%, or we're going to climb to just over 30% for the foreseeable future to fund that pension. And so that's a guaranteed increase of over $2 million a year for the foreseeable future. And we're not the only ones. My counterpart, Rick Scaletta, who's a superintendent in General McLean, has forecasted that General McLean will be facing the same sort of essentially bankruptcy ultimately from the pension system costs down the road. Now, certainly they're a lot further from that than we are. Mm-hmm. But in the 2021, 2023 range, somewhere in there, he's going to be facing crippling costs from that unfunded mandate. So that's the pension. That's number one. The other big one for us is charter schools. So at the same time that the modern version of our pension system was implemented, part of the negotiation, my understanding anyway, in Harrisburg was, number one, a more lucrative formula was passed for the pension payout, and in return, the state teachers union didn't contest the government's attempt to begin charter schools. Now, the idea behind charter schools was that you'd be able to start these sort of less regulated lab schools, places where a school could do innovative approaches to education that the parent school district could then possibly emulate, and maybe they'd be able to learn from schools operating in a less regulated environment and then copy them, essentially. But what they did not do is to come up with a way to fund them differentially. So what's happened certainly over the last 5 years is even though law allows for the state to provide a certain reimbursement for your costs of charter school tuition, the money actually on a per pupil basis is taken out of our budget and paid to the charter school. So in our case now, we have about 1,900 students that choose to go to either brick and mortar, actual physical charter schools, or to what are called cyber schools, which essentially is online learning.
And they take out the per pupil cost?
And they take the per pupil cost. And what's really interesting is for the cyber schools, now you can imagine it costs a lot to heat a building and to pay the teachers to be there and provide a cafeteria, gym, counselors, all those things that a traditional brick and mortar school offers. To run a cyber school, you have online curriculum, you may be paying teachers in cubicles to confer with students online, but the costs are much lower. And this is pretty well documented if anyone wants to take the time to search out in fact, our current Auditor General and our previous Auditor General both issued very extensive reports about the actual costs of cyber charters.
And they take out the same total though, right?
They take the same per pupil expense. And what's really interesting is, let's say the three of us decide to start a cyber charter school, which we could. And it gets approved by the state, and we start collecting the funds from the other schools that send their children to us. If we live in Lower Marion, where the per pupil expenditure is about $23,000 a child, the cyber charter gets $23,000 per student from Lower Marion. They'll get $12,000 or so for a student from Erie, even though their cost is the same. So these cyber charters have amassed huge fund balances or profit, if you will. That's why when you open up the Erie, I just saw the recent Erie magazine full-page ad from PA Cyber Charter. You'll see vehicles wrapped in cyber charter paint jobs outside of our athletic events. In fact, if you watch the news in the morning during the winter when we're all showing our school cancellations, PA Cyber actually bought the little
Creeper in the bottom?
Right, that little creeper. So that's your tax dollars that are going to Midland, Pennsylvania, where they're accruing huge sums of money that they can afford millions of dollars in advertising with public money to compete with us. So there are a lot of things wrong that way when you think about it in terms of mandates. That's just one of the things we're up against. But right now, $20 million of taxpayer money are being used to fund charter schools.
And I was on the board when they first started that. And I'd be glad to tell you what my vote was. It was no.
Okay.
But I'm amazed that, the same families that don't want anything to do with a brick and mortar public school, but all of a sudden there's an athletic team, and I'm just thinking it's like cherry picking the best of everything.
Right.
But,
And I'm not one, I would not
No,
sit and
I'm not
argue
either,
about
but-
whether they're good or bad, and I know people have made that choice.
But-
In
but
fact,
you
that's
know-
another issue for another day, is this whole notion of this new entitlement that we're calling
but
public school choice.
We've always been responsible to even service many things,
Oh, sure.
and those costs don't go away, the busing, the nursing, the
Right.
tutoring, all that stuff,
Sure. Even if we do not bus our own students, we don't bus all of our students. We are obligated to bus all charter school students.
And
under
home
the law.
tutoring and all that.
Right. Right.
It's costed.
Yeah.
How's our student enrollment holding up? Is it,
We're pretty stable, right around 12,000. Now, we've lost, again, we've always had a mix here in Erie. We've had a very healthy private and parochial population of students, and we've got about, like I said, 1,900 students in charters and cyber charters. We seem to be staying level there.
did we pick up a few as the Catholic schools closed a little bit?
That may have actually kept us stable, that some folks have come back. We have projections. We did a facility study, an optimization study a few years back that took a look at birth rates and so forth, and kind of forecasts an overall student population in Erie that will rise slightly, anywhere between, say, 13,000 and maybe 13,500 should be the total population of students in the city of Erie for the foreseeable future. That's a 10-year projection that we're working on right now.
And our high spot was probably, I'm guessing back when I went, probably 20,000 or?
Oh, we were over 20,000.
Really?
And that's what's really interesting. We still have roughly Now, we've closed a few elementary schools, but when we did our study a couple of years ago, we found that we had 7,216 empty seats in our district, because we essentially, at that time, had the same number of schools in operation that we did when we had over 20,000 kids. So that's an area that we realized early on could be a way for us to save. Yeah. So we have challenges. There's no lack of challenge. But I think the state really needs to figure this out. And this is one of those things that is going to require some bipartisan collaboration. There have been any number of bills that they've considered in the House and in the Senate to try to figure out a fairer way to fund these charter schools.
I got to believe the School Board Association is fighting them. The administrators are fighting them. We're fighting them here at the Pennsylvania League. And they got to come up with something that encompasses more than just real estate.
Right.
But also, in our case, we're talking about public safety. That's our big issue.
Right.
You're talking about education.
Sure.
So even if they don't call it a tax, they have to go after the nonprofits in such a way to say, hey, you know what? Public safety and education.
Right.
Or you can even include roads if you want. Not necessarily payroll or anything, but
Sure.
just, to cover basic education and public safety programs.
Well, that's what Mark and I were talking about before we went on the air. We were just talking about the whole tax exempt situation. That's another thing that hurts us in the city of Erie. So we have the highest rate of taxation in the city when you compare us with the other townships. One of the big factors that we have here is that because we're the city center and the county seat, there's a lot of tax exempt property here. And I've seen estimates as high as 40%, but it's safe to say that at least 30% of the property in the city of Erie is tax exempt. And that's including our pilots that we have. We have payment in lieu of tax agreements with our hospitals and with a number of our other senior care facilities and so forth that allow them to pay half, roughly. Usually it's anywhere from 35% to 50% of their tax liability.
Yeah, the mayor of Pittsburgh was shocked when he
Right.
found out that we get 50% out of it.
Right, it doesn't happen.
I don't want to say
everywhere.
who over the air, but
Right.
he was shocked. He was, couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that's a good thing, but it's also still inadequate when you're living in we have a lot of our folks who are maybe retirees.
Yep.
For whom a $100 increase in their tax bill is a big deal. And I'm sensitive to that. I think those of us making decisions at the school district are very sensitive to that. And it's got to stop. And it's been recognized at the state level. That's when you look at Governor Wolf's proposal for his budget, one of the things he's noted in there is that we've been forced to pick up the slack for the state locally. So instead of the state funding 50% of the cost of education as it is supposed to, most of that burden is falling back on taxpayers in the municipalities. And in our case, we do get more state aid than, let's say, Fairview or Harbor Creek. About 60% of our budget comes from state taxes. 35% comes from our local tax base. And that's an important number for people to understand. And if you go on our website, www.eriesd.org, we have a budget component on there. And in there you can see where our revenue comes from, what our expenses are. And since 35% of our funds come from local taxpayers, that means that if we've got a budget gap and our only recourse is to raise local taxes, that means you're raising it on only 35% of the pie. So again, it's too much of a burden for our local taxpayers. So I know there have been both Republican and Democratic approaches to trying to change the composition of taxes that are used to fund public schools. I just hope they can get together and figure it out.
It even bothers me that, and everybody's allowed to live where they want to.
Right.
But I like the Ohio system where you work is where you pay your income tax. Now, you can't do anything about the real estate tax, but if they would switch to income tax and, let's say, sales tax,
Right.
it might help Erie a little bit.
Sure.
Especially with the income tax. I mean, many of our people, let's face it, they live outside the city. So you're taking our per capita income's got to be lower in the city than it ever was.
It's way lower than the surrounding
So
townships.
like you say, now you're taxing a lesser percentage of that, which is not making that much money.
Right.
And the housing stock, I've heard, is cutting back a little bit, the value, so that all works against you.
Sure. And with the tax exempts, that's $1.2 billion worth of assessed value. That's with a B.
Oh.
$1.2 billion.
I'd like
Dollars
to have
worth
half
of-
of that.
Yeah, that's how much real estate is not taxed. And we could really get into some serious debates when we start thinking about what types of properties are tax exempt. I mean, the complexes that are being built in the Bayfront, which arguably could be some of our most lucrative land, is largely tax exempt.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I've debated what, the hotels are nice, but hey, you know what? They're really not what I call a nonprofit. They're built by a nonprofit, but you know what? I'm not against, the church and everybody else, they have their missions, but we all have to pay some kind of public service fee.
Sure.
And other places, quite frankly, shouldn't be tax exempt because they don't fit that mission,
Right. I think there's something to be said about reevaluating all of our tax exempt properties. And I know in some cities, Boston is a city where they actually had a very proactive approach to this problem. And what they did was they essentially reevaluated every tax exempt property. And then they approached every single one that even did qualify as being tax exempt for some sort of a payment in lieu of tax, no matter how small. And we talked earlier offline about $100. If you imagine, if there was some percentage of that $1.2 billion coming back to the taxing bodies, it could provide some relief to the person living in a single-family home, struggling to pay their bills. So I just hope that somehow they can get past ideology and realize that these things have changed numerous times over the years. As much as we hate change here, right now, even in terms of our overall state income tax, even if our state income tax were raised the 0.7% that the governor has proposed, it'll put us third for the third lowest income tax of all the states that tax, and there are like 41 of them that have an income tax throughout the country. So maybe we need to do something different. In Ohio, which is a very conservative state, at least in terms of who's in charge right now, they fund school construction, for example, at 2/3, 1/3. That is, the state pays 2/3, and then the local share is 1/3. Here, we get maybe a 20% reimbursement on school projects, and we've got buildings falling apart all around us. So I guess the fact is, and what I'd really like your viewers to understand is that I believe that the district now is operating much more frugally than it has in the past, largely because we have to. In order to keep our doors open, we've had to cut every year for the last 5 years just to stay afloat. And in doing so, we've hurt programs. There's no question. We have closed 3 schools. We right now, out of 500 school districts, we're number 448 in terms of our per pupil expenditure. That means we've pared down our spending so that we're 448th out of 500 school districts. That's, I guess, something to be proud of if you're measuring your progress in terms of how much you've gotten your budget under control. But it also means that we're not investing as much as we might in our kids' futures. And when I think of problems that we're facing as a city together, this perceived rise in violent crime, the constant comment that I hear from our employers about wanting some more better trained workers who can take advantage of some of the job opportunities that are out there, that requires a good, healthy education system.
I think it all points to education. I've said that before, that, people complain to me, they go, I don't have kids in the district. Yes, but you were educated
You were
by
a
the
kid.
district. And you know what, that if we don't invest in kids, to me, I would rather pay a teacher more money than I would an athlete or an entertainer. But we got it all topsy-turvy in this world, Right. And, I mean, for 12 years, we got where we can make a difference. And when we get off the air, I'll tell you, how important that is.
Sure.
And I think education is always slighted.
Right.
We don't put it on the news. We don't have a student of the week or, things like that. And you're right. I mean, if you want to know why we got the troubles we do, it's because we've allowed it to happen. We got youth without direction. We've had to cut back on a lot of things.
Right. There are examples around the country. If you don't have to look too far. I mean, if you look at Detroit, Flint, some of the areas around Michigan, where the auto industry is really scaled back, and a lot of poverty in those cities. I mean, their approach to urban renewal is a bulldozer.
Yeah.
And you know, they've had such huge budget problems that in some cases had double sessioning of students, 40, 50, 60 kids in a classroom. I'd hate to see us get to that point. The problem is the weaker our school system gets, the more people move away, and the worse
I
it
can
gets.
remember the factor in where my dad moved was corner store and a school.
There you go, yeah, oh yeah.
Perry School was right there, you know, but that was important, you know, a neighborhood with a...
Still is. That's what realtors, that's what they point out when people are looking for a home. They check out the quality of the schools. And so my hope is to continue to, we've been doing more with less.
And I don't believe, and I've been chastised with this statement, I think we do just as good a job here as anybody.
If you look at our numbers, if you look at the kids, our best performing students are performing, like we're measured against students from all over, and I can show you rosters of students from each one of our schools who are scoring advanced on the state assessment.
I just had one of your students take care of me today at my doctor's office.
All right.
I mean, it works.
What's getting scary to me is I now have former students who are old enough to be doctors and teachers.
But that's not bad, though.
I know. But
You want to open it up, or?
yeah, why don't we? I'd love to know what
Okay,
people
that's
would
why
like to know. Yeah, sure.
Can you, the statement improvise, adapt, and overcome?
Yes.
Can you tell us something that the Erie School District, that you're doing, the board is doing, that would drop right under that, you know, improvise, adapt, and overcome, out of the box? You know, what's the school district doing?
Sure. In terms of adapt, improvise, and overcome, we had, wow, not that long ago, I guess it was almost 5 years ago, not only did we have a $26 million budgetary shortfall, but and that's, and just to keep it simple, I mean, that's the money you're allotted for your operations for 1 year. But what was happening, the district had settled into a pattern of overspending its budget for successive years to the point where we were facing $16 million basically an accrued cash deficit. So in other words, we might get budget money on July 1st, but we were paying the previous budget year's bills with that money. And so we had a $26 million single year budgetary shortfall, and then we had $16 million that we owed in terms of back bills from the previous year's budget. So
You had to
really,
take out those trans, right?
yeah, and we were borrowing over $30 million a year to pay our upfront costs before our tax revenue started to come in from our local money. So we got rid of that, but we had to do some innovative things there, and we stumbled upon a method of financing called lease-back because we were trying to figure out how we would tend to our building needs too. We have over 21 buildings, and many of them are in pretty serious disrepair. And we're trying to figure out with everything we owe, how will we maintain roofs, that sort of thing. And we learned that there were places around the country that were doing these lease-back arrangements where essentially you turn over ownership of a building and you enter into a lease agreement that at the end of the lease, the ownership reverts back to you. So we were able to work with the general authority to enter into a lease-back arrangement for our non-school buildings. So our admin building, our kitchen, our service center were some of the buildings that we leveraged, and we were able to get enough cash out of that situation to pay off our old debts. It was within our budgeted amount that we had for our bond servicing, and so we were able to get out of that hole, and that was huge. That cash crunch was crippling us.
Who does the maintenance on the buildings? The leaseholder then, or?
Well, we still do it. The way it's
still do
written, we maintain the building still, so we do that. We didn't surrender that, but at least on paper, those 4 buildings are now owned by the general authority until the expiration of that term, which is about I think it's a 10-year note.
So it wasn't a private company like everybody thought it was?
No, this was done through the general authority, and the Municipal Law Act allows the district to sell any or all of its buildings to a municipal authority. So that's something we've toyed with too, is having a separate entity that would own the real estate, and that would change the financial structure of the district, which is maybe some improvisation for another day. So I'd love to know what people are questioning out there.
Let's see. Make bid, uh-oh. Let's see, we'll try to,
Did people give up on us?
no, we'll find out. We'll see. The lines are open. We'll find out. I may have to get Mike out here, my IT guy. But, yeah, I mean, even the city, we had the same problem for a while, you know, and for the last almost 10 years now, we haven't taken a Tran out.
Right.
But it's terrifying when you think about that. Every year you're looking at, you know, $20 million. And
Oh, yeah.
you haven't even done anything. You just,
And then you're accruing interest. So we changed our tax billing dates. And I know that was cause of consternation for a lot of folks, but
here we
go.
Go ahead, caller.
Good afternoon.
How did I know it'd be you first?
Well, because I live in Southeast Erie where all the heat is being wasted at Joanne O'Connell School.
Oh.
Ah,
I understand, Mr. Badams, that you are on digital thermostats.
that's correct.
Why then are all the windows open when it's 20 degrees?
Well, that's an outstanding question after the winter we've been through, and I'll be sure to look into that.
In fact, I called one time, there was only one window open, and I talked to somebody down there, and I asked him if there was a smoking room there. You know, like you used to have smoking rooms, but he said there's no smoking allowed in the...
Ew, no, that's a taboo in this school.
Yeah, it's illegal.
And I told him to email me what his answer would be, and he refused to do that. I assumed he didn't want to get it down in black and white, his answer, where I could print it out and have the proof in my hand.
Sure.
And I went by here recently again when the weather was cold, and there they are, all open.
What time of the day? Is that night or in the daytime?
No, daytime.
Oh,
And the sun wasn't even out.
Well, I will check on that one. Just so you know, we're participating in an energy audit, and I've got a real go-getter teacher named Doreen Petrie, who is one of our science teachers out of Collegiate Academy, who's been doing energy audits on each building, and it's actually our students who've been trying to pay careful attention to people, like adults' behavior, like opening windows when they shouldn't be. And I'll have her focus on that, but we've been looking at our light usage, making sure that lights are turned off when people aren't around, turning off computer systems.
And I do notice the lights are on constantly down there in the evening time, and I assume that is for security purposes, and I thought they would be on an eye.
Well, I'll check that, because that's one of the ways that we've been able to actually save tens of thousands of dollars is by doing a better job of that, and it sounds like we might be falling off the mark at Joanne O'Connell.
Right. Now I see this, you have this retirement deal coming up, and you're going to be having all these new teachers coming in, and you're negotiating a contract. Don't you think it'd be wise now to negotiate a 401k, and then they can start adding to their own pension, and the district only covering up to so much when they add in?
You know what? I think that's a great idea. Unfortunately, like I was telling Kaz, our pension's dictated by Harrisburg. We don't negotiate that. So unfortunately, we're stuck with whatever the state provides through the Pennsylvania, it's a PSERS, and that's who controls that. So we can't even negotiate it.
no, in fact, John, they were talking about 3 or 4 years ago. You might have been on council then. They were talking about taking initially uniform police and fire and sticking them in a statewide plan, and for sure would have been anybody under 50% funded threshold, which we weren't in that case, but Harrisburg is always thinking that way, you know.
Right.
But
Well, in 2010, they did make some minor changes that are a little bit more beneficial to the taxpayer. The vesting period for most of our employees for that pension is 5 years. 5 years you're vested. They doubled that to 10. So now the new teachers coming in have a 10-year vesting period, and they upped the percentage of gross pay that the employee has to contribute a little bit. But that does not change the overall like 40 billion, 50 billion that we're underfunded at the state
Well,
level.
your biggest problem, I believe, was when the federal government gave X amount of dollars for so many years, and the taxpayers got a little bit of a break. Then they start mandating everything that you should be doing, and the federal government should stay out of schooling. But other than that,
Wow, I like,
Yeah, I think a couple of solutions you just raised could help us considerably in terms of our survival.
that's true. I mean, we've got to realize that the educators are the educator and the government is supposed to be the government.
Yeah,
They
but
shouldn't get out of the business of trying to be running government and stay out of education.
John, imagine politicians listening to educators.
It's true. I mean,
I know, I agree with you, but imagine that, though. What a world that would be.
Well, with this early retirement, at least you're going to come in with a lower salary grade for the teachers, and it might help the taxpayers a little bit. The Homestead was supposed to help a lot, the Homestead Act. It has helped some taxpayers a lot, but some of them haven't even qualified or even applied for it.
Right.
They don't understand it. But I'll get off and thank you anyways. Thank you for your answer, and look into that.
Yeah, I certainly will. I've got it down.
And I have your email, so I'll send you off an email, and then you can reply, and I can have it on paper.
Sure, I'll let you know what I find out.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Actually, some schools, you gotta have lights on because, you know, you have damage and...
Right.
I was just going to ask,
Go ahead, caller.
has the school district negotiated
good
with
afternoon,
other
gentlemen.
electric suppliers?
Yes. Good
Yes.
afternoon.
Go ahead. Hello?
I have a question concerning the schedule that you guys follow for the starting of the school year.
Sure.
I just don't understand how we can tout Erie as a vacation destination, and yet if you start school before Labor Day, you are shutting down so many businesses in Erie. I know you said that you've gone through negotiations and you've asked about this and you've talked to your teachers about this, but I still don't understand the common sense behind starting the school year prior to Labor Day. And if you could address that, I would appreciate it.
Sure. What it's come down to for us is weighing the cost of that. I haven't met too many employers who've really told us that they're crippled when our students come back to school. This year, actually, Labor Day is late. We'll actually start August 31st of this school year. There is no union reason. There's no contract provision that prevents us from starting after Labor Day. We could do it. What it ends up being now is with the state holding us so accountable for test scores, the addition, we'd have to make up that time either by cutting it out of an Easter break or some other area, and we just haven't had a compelling enough reason to do it. I guess we could talk to the Chamber of Commerce to see if it's truly, if we survey the employers, if the folks at Sarah's and some of the other employers that rely on seasonal help.
Well, I mean, just yourself as a taxpayer, as a citizen, doesn't it make sense to tack on a day or two at the end of the school year and allow? I just don't understand where the common sense is lost in this logic.
Right. Again, our main purpose is education. So our testing is in April. So by the time we have our Christmas and our holiday break, we're actually counting days. I mean, as far as how much English language arts instruction, how much math instruction, and so that's the best I can offer you as far as what our rationale has been, is to maximize the number of school days that we get in before April. But it's something we talk about every year and we debate it every year, and the answer keeps coming up. Start early. So we can look at it again. We'll have that conversation yet again. But I think if I bring this to the Chamber of Commerce, I'm a member there, and I think if we were able to get a better handle on just how big that need is, then I guess I could decide better whether I agree with you that it's a matter of common sense. I'm just not sure how big an impact our student population has on employers and the economy.
I think you might be surprised, and I appreciate you giving it some thought. But other school districts start after Labor Day. I just cannot for the life of me figure out the common sense behind this.
Right. Well, look, I mean, most of the districts around here that I'm aware of don't, except for Mill Creek, who just did it this year because they had renovation going on, and I'm sure they're going to be going back to their previous calendar now that renovation is complete. But I'll also bring it up with our superintendent's group. We all meet. All the Tri-County area superintendents meet monthly, and I'll make this an agenda item.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
And I had asked we know I get, like at home and at work, I get deluged with these requests,
Yeah.
to change your energy supplier.
Right.
Mostly for electric, but we know that a lot of industry can pick their gas supplier.
Right.
The school district, I guess, like squeezing every dollar, in those areas.
We do, and we have, again, we like to leverage the combined buying power of other school districts. That's an area where often through our intermediate unit we'll be approached by various providers. We also are members of the Manufacturing Business Association. They have services toward that end as well. So our business office does concern itself with making sure that we're negotiating a good deal in terms of our energy use.
Go ahead.
Well, then the other thing is, most recently we were taking a look at our busing situation. So rather than using diesel fuel, we just purchased a number of propane buses. So there's been some problem with the conversion to propane in rural districts where there's a lot of dirt and so forth that gets in those motors, but in an urban area like ours, we think it's going to be a great way for us to save some money. So we just converted, we installed a propane facility at our service center, so that's one area where we're trying to curb our energy usage. We're due, though. We do have a new CFO who's taking over May 1st, a couple days, and I'm sure that's an area that he'll want to look at and take a look at all those contracts. So.
How's our gas wells? Are they still low down, or?
Yeah, our gas wells, we've been trying to, we try to revive. We have a number of them. For those of you who don't know, we have gas wells on several of our properties. A lot of them have sort of outlived their useful lives, and they're not producing much, if anything.
I think like Tech and Glenwood Zoo are on the same one almost.
Yeah, so probably depleting.
It's funny
that.
how when yours died, our zoo died too with it.
Yeah. Well, we've actually got a couple of companies that have been working with us to try to reinvigorate some of those without new drilling. There's apparently new technology that they can try to pump these things back to some sort of useful life. So
Weren't you converting vehicles to natural gas for a while too, right?
They did. We tried natural gas for a while, and what I learned was that they were really prone. We sort of retrofitted engines, and they were very prone to dirt and fouling, and that's what happened. We had more service costs associated with that conversion, and apparently these engines that we're getting now that are propane are pretty well tested, and apparently it's a cleaner way to do that. So we're giving it a try, and we got a grant to do this, and so we're moving forward.
How's boy, it was an issue that we were concerned with the community college, not the city,
yeah.
but obviously the county and the region, and trying to prepare for, what do we want to say, a higher level of education.
Mm-hmm.
How are the students, let's say, coming through the Erie School District today versus 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
In terms of college readiness or college
or
attainment?
just their general level of, let's say, just a high school. Mm-hmm. Can they compete against other school districts,
sure.
High school age kids? Yeah,
we're getting better and better in that area. And I think the Central Tech is, I'm continually impressed by the work they're doing there. They keep getting better and better to the point where we've got a number of employers who've been working directly with us. Most recently, FMC Corporation actually set up a deal where they're taking some of our students and giving them, it's not even a co-op experience, it's actually they're employing them in an internship. So I know for a fact that we had a machinist and a welder that had been employed, and
they're kind of training them for the job. Right?
Yeah, they're getting on-the-job training. They're essentially spending half their day working, and then they have an offer of employment if they work out successfully.
And this is what the South was doing for years.
Right.
Where I think, and I agree with you, Doctor. I think when I went to Tech, those trades are now gone. A lot of them.
Oh, they are.
And I was impressed when after our meeting.
Oh yeah.
And
I
hadn't been there in years, and I said, I was talking to a welding teacher. These kids are all got a job.
Oh yeah.
It just, the things are more relevant. There's a lot of interplay between them too, which wasn't always there.
Sure.
One shop reacts with the other one. But I was impressed with the companies are now calling on you,
They are.
but providing machinery, up-to-date stuff, their equipment, so that these kids can
Yeah.
pop right in.
A number of Erie businesses have been extremely generous. They're seeing good things happening there, and so now they're not only giving us machinery, and we've had everything from a large like a plastic injection machine to welding equipment, and now they're giving us supplies. So what is often scrap for some of our manufacturers is being donated to our students. In fact, there's things for sale up there right now. The kids are making things, selling them, so that they can then use the profits from those sales to buy new materials.
Well, you could use your business classes to, hey, let me ask you
Yeah.
a question. Barron, well-known for plastic, right? And when I was on the board, I know we were talking about it was initial, but things like the culinary school at Mercyhurst, the culinary school at Central, the Barron plastics program, are they integrated to some degree where our kids can kind of like maybe even end up at?
Sure, we have articulation agreements with especially at Central Tech, with a lot of the different local colleges. And I think what's really interesting is there's such a demand now that we actually extended that to Strong Vincent, East, and Collegiate. So now Mr. Punt, who's our Director of Career and Tech, has made it possible for students at the other high schools to take career and tech classes during the day. So they'll get their academic classes, for example, at East, and then they'll take a bus over to Central Tech and then actually gain a trade. So we piloted this last year and didn't get too many takers. But this year we've had a couple of full classes of students from both East and Vincent who've taken advantage of this.
Kind of maximizing one school.
Yeah, absolutely, because the programming that they're offering over there is great. It's relevant, and I think our business community is seeing that. We've had a number of folks through for tours. In fact, I think later this week we'll even have some more folks going through to see the wonderful things that are happening in that very old and rickety structure. It's great programming going on in that building, and always impressed. The other really neat thing about what they're doing there is the different shops. That's what we would have all called them. They're now labs, but they were separate. And they very seldom came together for any purpose, but businesses don't operate that way. So in our auto body lab, for example, where they learn how to do different coatings, everything from powder coating to traditional painting, all the preparation work. We have our machine technology lab where they're actually working on everything from CNC machines to traditional metal fabrication stuff. Our welding shop. They have been working on projects together where it requires all those different labs to do some component of that job, just like they would in a manufacturing corporation.
And you kind of see it at Christmas in a very simplistic way when they put their lighting up.
Right. Oh yeah. The Tech the Halls program has been real popular.
And you see the collaboration where
Right.
When I went to Tech, it's the old system, and you didn't see that.
Right.
You were in your own little area, and that was it.
Right.
And I think it is interesting now when you talk to some of the instructors, and you say, yeah, my kids are working with the other shop,
Sure.
the other lab, and
Yeah. Some of the people, like most recently, or for the Perry 200, for example, we had. It sounds silly, but they were souvenir cannons. They were actual replicas of the what are called the carronades on the Brig Niagara, and they had a metal gun, the cannon replica, on a wooden chassis, and then they were fixed on. They had some ropes and so forth on there. Well, they actually had to take photographs of the actual cannons on the Niagara, and they used those to create prototypes, which they made on a 3D printer. So, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's an actual printer that takes liquefied plastic and lays down layer by layer and actually prints a 3D object. So
I got to see one because
it's
still
amazing.
marveling when I see it.
Oh yeah, and then what they do is they use that prototype to set up their CNC machines to actually machine the cannons. They then had to go from the machine shop to the paint shop to have the coating. They have a black paint on them. And then we involved everybody. We have life skills classes at Central Tech. These are our students with pretty moderate to severe special education needs who worked in quality control, and did some of the finish work on the carriages and so forth, and they put it all together, and they had to meet deadlines. There was an actual event down on the Bayfront during the Tall Ships event where they actually gave away and sold these things. So they did a great job, just a testament to the hard work of the teachers and the students. And they learned important lessons about working together, meeting deadlines, what happens when something goes wrong, and they get backed up in the finish step of the process. It was a really impressive feat, and they're doing more things like that now. Big thing now.
I think tech for a while there was kind of like drifting. Nobody quite knew.
They're on a roll right now, and one of the other things is they're getting people donating what normally would be garbage. Anyone who drove down Peach Street saw they have a big sign out near the gas well there for selling products. They've been getting donated pallets, wooden pallets, and they were in the carpentry shop. They were making all kinds of different household items out of these recycled pallets. So a lot of interesting hardwood goods that you can get there. And
Well, I can remember, like, even at, in printing, for instance, they were so far behind. And districts can't always update equipment like that. It's pretty expensive.
Sure.
So I think when you have a business that's going to come in and say, you know what, you're going to help me because you're going to have trained employees when we're done at the end of the day.
Right.
So for them, it's an investment. They can send down a little bit older piece of equipment, which you can still afford, maybe.
Oh, yeah. And then they can at least get the experience on doing like manual setups and stuff like that. I guess the other thing I'd like people to know out there, as far as how your tax dollars are being spent, along this line, how are we making sure that the students are going to be workers? And it goes back to your question, Mark. We've got a situation in our city where we have high poverty, and in many of our families, there are not examples of people who do a 40-hour work week and punch a clock and have a career. And we've talked about how that's really not our job for years, but we're done saying that. We can't keep saying that and expect a different outcome. So we're teaching our youngest students how to find their place in the economy by teaching them career exploration. We have a software program that is now being used by all of our pre-K through high school kids that actually it's grade appropriate along the way, but we're making sure that career education is a part of what all of our students get all along from K through. So.
Yeah, I think that over the years, I've always said that I think that was sometimes lacking when I was, nobody, when you get out of high school, you just don't know what you're doing.
Right.
The Army looked like a good option, college maybe,
Right.
but then again,
the Army
maybe,
to pay for college.
yeah, there you go. But I mean, I think you're right. When you look at it, I don't call it throwing away a generation, but we almost have to start at square one. And as Dr. Barker used to always say, and others have used the same comment, easier to pay in the front than in the back. You don't want kids incarcerated or drifting through life. So, it's very important when you get them when they're young.
Right.
And get them, thinking that way that, yeah, you can control your life.
Right.
I
guess that's how I feel about paying school tax. I mean, I would much rather have a properly educated student graduating from our high schools than being forced to pay for the maintenance of that individual either through public assistance or through incarceration.
I had one teacher, well, three actually, that shaped my life. Had they not, I don't know. Am I an 11 Bravo in the Army, walking around, ending up doing nothing in life? I don't know, but the fact that I got a degree in accounting, I thank three of those teachers,
Sure.
But people don't, that's why it doesn't bother me when we spend on education, because that's really our most important asset.
Well, I've heard on more than one occasion that without teachers, no other profession exists.
Yeah.
It takes teachers to teach our future doctors, our future lawyers, our future city council people.
But it's amazing, and I've talked to you, but I hope someday that we recognize that, like other school districts do, where we put pictures of some of our best and brilliant on.
Right.
So when kids walk down the hall every day, they say, you know what? 20, well, Prep does a great job of that. They tell you how many kids go to college, and they brag about it, And I used to always like to say, if we walk down our halls, how many doctors we got? How many teachers we got? How many people that just, graduation rates, everything, that when you come here, you're expected to produce.
Right.
This is not, what do you call it? It's nice if you finish, but we expect you to finish.
Oh, yeah.
And we expect you to, well, not everybody has to go to college, you know, but there are other success stories out there.
Right.
You know, people that started businesses and
We have very many wealthy people in the trades.
and people that have started businesses on their own that didn't go to college, you know, that just, you know, and I think sometimes we don't toot our horn. You know, people always say, oh, look at this guy. We got kids that went to Ivy League schools, you know, and I look at my family, and I'm not bragging, but you know, I had a doctor of pharmacy, a lawyer, a professional dancer, and I'm saying, you know, we have those all the time.
All
we're
over.
throwing them out. But everybody looks at our negative, you know, and it's easy.
Well, I would encourage anyone out there who has a computer to check out our website, because we have been, I think, doing a much better job of putting that information out there through our online newsletter. And we're pitching stories to the Times and the media outlets all the time. And it just, you know, it's not always the good news that sells.
No, because what's that the old math in a newspaper?
Yeah.
A bad story generates 3, and a good story generates 1.
Right.
Well, there was another thing too that said, spell my name correctly.
Right. And if it bleeds, it leads, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
No, you think, you know, you look out there, Mark, and I remember I told the colonel over at East one day, I said, you know, I know your program's working. I saw a bunch of your kids in front of the post office one day, and there was nobody around. And they were on some kind of special volunteer program. No advisor, no nothing. And every word out of their mouth was, sir. And I said, and they're practicing marching out there.
Right.
On a Saturday. And I'm going, that's when I knew. I said, whatever you were doing, you had them under control.
The world is still okay.
Yeah, I mean, those are kind of examples. We get kids all the time doing that, you know.
Well, it's time to get going.
Well, would you like to wrap it up?
Sure. I'd just like to say, if anyone out there has any questions, again, I'll refer you to our district website. It's www.eriesd, as in school district.org. And on that site, you'll find all of our financial information, all of our tax information. Everything's available, and it's very self-explanatory and user-friendly. And in addition, you might bump into some news items that'll give you a little more information about the things the district is doing. And also encourage you to be engaged in this debate about the governor's budget proposal. Regardless of your political orientation, it is time to try to find some way to solve the problems facing not just public education, but our state budget in general. And it might mean some sort of change. And that's not always a bad thing. We just got to make sure that we don't let political division and ideology prevent us from doing what's right. And if we let our public schools fail, whether it's in the city of Erie or in Fairview or anywhere, we're in big trouble for lots of reasons that we've discussed pretty thoroughly here today.
Well, thank you, Dr. Adams, and I'll give you credit. Not many people want to come on, and you never know how many phone calls we're going to get, but I'm sure I'll hear some of the comments around town, too.
Sure.
But thank you. You're welcome anytime you'd like
Yeah,
to.
and I'd be more than happy to come back. I think when we get a little closer to budget time and people have a better understanding of what the fallout's going to be, then there'll be more questions.
Thank you for showing.
Sure thing. Yeah.
And thank you, Mark, and thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we've got a short list of homework.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have been watching the Taxpayers Hotline Show on Erie's own Government Access, Channel 9.